Um, Basically, what I would invite us to reflect about is that all of us who are here today, I think, share in common this concern about the planet, and particularly the issue of nature and environment, ecology, ecological systems, and how humans relate to it. I think several of us have a particular connection to the issue of food and food systems. And at the same time, my sense is that all of us are experiencing how challenging it is to work with the existing structural constraints that often may not be conducive or supportive to the care that we feel and that we want to contribute. And since this is the last day of the Spirit of Humanity Forum, I felt it's helpful to just share a bit from our stories. Also, how in everyday life we maneuver this tension between our own journey as beings that would like to cultivate certain qualities of relating, and on the other hand, facing the constraints and the structures that we are embedded in that have been built over generations. And yeah, how we maneuver this tension, and maybe what inspiring insights we can share with the others that are listening to us in this moment. And maybe one last word that I care particularly about and that I also connect with all of you is that for me, a lot of my attention is about how to cultivate trust. Because I experience so much how people that work in a systemic context are actually afraid of each other and meet each other not really as human beings, but often just like roles or functions that are stressed and pressured by their conditions. And it's so challenging to still get a sense we connect here as human beings who can trust each other because we share certain values. And that's what I particularly like about bringing the four of you together. I think there is a shared common ground and there is a basis of trust that I know because I know all of you. And now I'm really happy to connect the four of you. And I'll say a few words about how I connected to you, how I brought you here, so to speak, and then I would invite you to share your stories. We will listen to each of our stories in a row, and then I'm curious who would first like to pick up on what he or she has heard from each other. Maybe I start with you, Nicole, to say a few words about you, because we both met at the Spirit of Humanity Forum. Last time the roles were switched between the two of us. You were hosting a panel and were introducing me to the Spirit of Humanity Forum. I think it was also the last day, and for me it was a very beautiful experience. You were holding a beautiful space for me, and now I feel it's interesting to reconnect in this way, switching the roles and hearing a bit more of your story. And you are at the moment with the World Economic Forum. Oh, we lost Lanying. I hope she comes back. You're currently with the World Economic Forum and interested particularly in nature-based solutions. And I'm particularly interested how you bring your interest and your passion for nature and nature-based solutions into an environment that often functions in very different logics, as I can imagine. So I'm curious on your perspective on that. And Martin, I think the last time that we connected was in Madrid at the climate conference. We were both sitting on a panel together. And you were joining also our reflection and dialogue space. We've met several years ago, and you used to work with the UNFCCC Secretariat back then. Now you have moved to the FAO, to Rome, to take care of the Global Food Summit. And I'm really curious. I haven't heard how your journey has continued since we met in Madrid, so I'm very happy that you are here to bring in your perspective.
Thank you.
And Lanying, we met in December 2019. That's 1.5 years ago. We met in China at a conference in Kunshan, and I was so inspired. You gave two presentations, I remember, back then. One about your work with community-supported agriculture, and one more about the ecological wisdom traditions and how they can become part of leadership understanding. I know you've also worked with youth leadership for quite some time, and I'm so happy that you are here with us to bring in that perspective of ecological wisdom but very on the ground. I know you're working with farmers in the field. I think you just told me you come from working in the field for 1 week. So you're at a very different place in the system, very complementary, I feel, to us. I'm so happy that you could join us. It's late already in China. I'm happy that you're here. And Ottar, are you in Iceland at the moment, I feel, right? You are in Reykjavik with all our other friends. Ottar, you are the former Minister of Health of Iceland. And you've been also with the Spirit of Humanity Forum for several years already. And we've been involved in so many preparation calls leading to the Spirit of Humanity Forum. So I know you for quite some time, but I don't really know so deeply about your experience working in the executive context of politics. And that is something where I often feel that is where the pressure might be highest, where there's so much public attention and so much politicking in the background. I'm curious how you experienced trust, but also this tension of bringing your deeper values into your context there. I feel in this combination of the five of us, we address multiple layers of working within systems. And I'm curious what kind of complementarity will arise from the five of us. So much as introduction from my side. I admit I'm a little excited. It's the first time that I host a panel through online space, and I'm so curious how we will enable to really feel deeply connected. I have moved into our institute here to kind of imitate a little bit of this feeling of sitting together in a circle of chairs. I hope each of us can somehow relate to that feeling as we now enter into our dialogue. I have no order in our mind for us who I would like to invite first to share. Does any one of you feel like going first to share your story, how you come into the conversation of our topic, and maybe an open end that you're sitting with at the moment? Maybe someone of you feels like speaking first. I know we are all humble.
Well, Tom, maybe I can try to break the ice if you want me to.
Thank you. Gladly, Martin.
Well, I mean, a current experience that I'm doing is helping to prepare the Food System Summit. And we call it a system summit because we want to show the interlinkages and not only have a meeting of ministers of agriculture, but really bring all the systems perspectives in. And there are two things I'm struggling with. It's trying to do a systemic thing in a system that is deeply unsystemic because every government loves slicing and dicing reality into responsibilities of different ministers. So the whole aspect of coming in from a systems perspective is difficult enough. And then the second bit I'm struggling with is our basic presumption is that we need a systems transformation. But the second you enter into an international space, you basically start negotiating, whether you want it or not. And then you start to compromise. And there's always this trap of coming up with any compromise and celebrating your success because you found the compromise. But is that really addressing what needs to be addressed? And what I'm hoping for, and I think that relates to this forum, is that if you have one position and another position, and you're not somehow meeting in the middle, but you're meeting on top with a joint solution that moves both sides or multiple sides up, that spirit is just not there. How do you create this spirit and how do you keep this belief that something like that is possible when the whole system defaults to exactly zero-sum games and to fragmentation, not to integration? Maybe I stop here. That's what currently is in my mind around these topics.
Thanks, Martin. Nicole, somehow my attention goes to you. Could I invite you to introduce yourself and your story and coming here?
Yes, thank you, Tom, and thank you, Martin. I can probably relate to what you're saying. Very interesting. So I've been working at the intersection of gender, well-being, environmental issues for many years in different roles. And I think always just having a tendency to see the system, and at the same time, I guess, cognizant that sometimes to shift things, you need to become very specific. So I think, I mean, also one of the things on my mind in this space is how can you, like when you're, because when you're always looking at the whole system, you see the whole complexity. And this can be extremely overwhelming. And sometimes it actually stops action because you don't know where to start, because it is so huge and overwhelming. And so I found myself many times always seeing the whole system and then saying, well, how do we start, right? And actually being very finding it very interesting that some people who are extremely sharp and focused on one piece sometimes drive things forward much faster, because they're taking one element and they're actually driving that, and that ultimately can also change the system. So I guess in my experience, I've also been moving from being in, roles where it's more looking at the system and then taking a more entrepreneurial approach and saying, okay, let's just take one aspect, like on gender equality in the workplace, and not thinking about all the gender issues in the world and trying to move that forward. And similarly, I mean, at the moment, I'm co-leading the 1T.org, which is the World Economic Forum's Trillion Trees platform, which is it's really a platform that was set up in service to the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, which was launched yesterday, and to bring together all the different actors and players that have been working on this topic for decades. So again, extremely complex topic, from halting deforestation to conservation to restoration. And so within that, again, seeing, well, okay, what's the one angle we can take, or what are a few of these that we can take as the World Economic Forum, which is more the private sector lens, ecopreneurship, building this movement to drive this forward. So I think so what, in terms of your question, how do I come to this conversation? I guess systems have always been on my mind wherever I've been. And, and then the other part of it is the more spirituality aspect of, our values, our integrity. And in this case, for me, it's really a deep connection to nature and kind of this, how to live in harmony with nature, but at a very deep level. So if I may bring one more thing into the conversation, it's, so on one hand, the systems, and which I would say can be more of a mental, rational approach of, okay, let's, how can we analyze this? And maybe that relates to what you were saying, Martin, at a deeper level, feeling this connection and this, what's kind of this higher level order where we can find consensus, where we can find, and which is, maybe connected very deeply. In however words we want to put on it, or however our paths are, but maybe something that can move us at a different level. So could say much more, but I'll stop here for now.
Yeah. I see you nodding, Lanying, and somehow Nicole, what you're saying really reminds me of the conversations with Lanying, and also together with our friend Man, because you speak about the connection between man and nature. And I know that was a key topic for us, how Chinese culture actually sees nature as Zuran, the self as it is, like, and it's sometimes even astonishing. I remember for you, like, why do you even split human and non-human nature? So I somehow feel like transitioning to you, Lanying, to invite you to share how you come to us.
Yeah. I think first you shared that I have what I have been working with the community support agriculture, but also since I work quite a long time with the farmers, so I realized that there's an invisible system that at the farmers level or fishermen's, they have already, there's an invisible system within their system. So what we talk about global system, what you said a while ago, I also share the same feelings as you said. It's so big, we're so small. But this is kind of a human created global system. But another way we will see there's a earth and heaven with the human. And these three elements can coexist and nurtured a system that really kind of a way of being all the things are being part of the system. So that's why we see the heaven, the universe, and the earth are all the part of the system. So when I share with you unhuman and human, because in China they talk about harmony, harmony, harmony among these three elements: universe and earth and human. So human is bridging of this these elements into a whole system. And I feel that the farmers, when I just came from the field from a fishing community, they have a quite a good system living with the nature, which we are modern system trying to break it down. So I really found their wisdom of how to living with the white dolphin, and they even see the dolphin when the dolphin appear near the seashore. That means the following day the weather will change. So they have already discovered the pattern of the living life with their activities. So all this what we call ecological wisdom embedded in their daily life and working life, which is totally different from the system that we are creating. Because I had working on the solid waste system, so I was also talking about how to setting up all the system with the government, with the communities, with social organizations, how we operate in a systematic way. That but however, if you meet a group of people who share the same vision, you can achieve it. But if not, actually, it's quite difficult. So I think I really see the being with the nature, living with the nature, and learn from the nature is the bottom thing that system could be really run smoothly. Although sometimes invisible, because we're one saying that the people daily practice without awareing is a system. But even in the farming system, and every time when you see that the families, communities come together to help one farm, and the following day to help another family, you don't know how the sequence would be. But every farmers knows today they go there, and the second day how they help the others. They collectively finish all the farm works collectively. So all this has been established over the years, and building the human relationships, they are already in their blood. I think they know, even they don't need to speak. But from outsiders, we don't know that. So, so when you invite me, spear this topic, I think is quite interesting. I'm also trying to learn the Chinese traditional classicals wisdom. They described about how the wisdom could be nurtured, and looking at the global system, we're talking about how to cultivate our inner strength, our our kind of kindness within each person. But is what you said is the relationship with the others will be visible for your kindness. So unless you help the others, you cultivate your own kindness, and help, and trying to do it by helping the others to be visible of your kindness is being visible. That's a way of trust building also, as you said. So it's really kind of a traditional belief that has their own everybody has the same. That's the 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 the, the life, the origin of the life is like the light. Everybody has a light in their mind. It's just how you bring your light to light the others. But while you light the others will be like you also. I think sometimes it's a little bit difficult to explain because the classical wisdom I'm trying to learn, even when we learn the traditional Chinese, is also difficult. But translate into English is a little bit difficult. But I'll try, and I feel this is the chance for me also to learn from you. Sorry, I take a little bit longer time.
Thank you, Lanying.
Mm,
Um, it reminds me how I learned that Chinese grow up with with this notion that the origin of all human beings is good. There is this saying, I can't say it completely, but it starts with "ren zhi chu."
性本善. Yeah,
Yeah,
人之初性本善. Yeah, that's what you said. You translate more
and
accurately.
what I learned from it is that basically with this traditional saying, Chinese convey the belief on the conviction that the human nature itself is good.
Mm,
And the
mm.
path of life is about cultivating this goodness in their way of acting.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
kind of transition us then to you, Ottar. You have been in politics. And from my experience, I feel that can sometimes challenge this belief of how is it about the intrinsic goodness of human beings, you know? And I see Martin smile. I mean, also in the administrative and other processes in politics, well, it gets challenged. So how do you hold that tension? And share a little bit with us how you come to our conversation.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. I'm a bit of an accidental politician, to tell the truth. I came into politics in a period of great upheaval here in Iceland after the economic crash in 2008, when our economic system and then political system and all our systems basically almost collapsed, and the trust in this small communities evaporated very quickly. So my background is in the arts, in bookselling and punk rock, being in rock groups and so on. And it was very interesting for me to find that human systems, and I'm very Lanying, you've really gotten me thinking about this connection with human systems and natural systems, because we in the West, I think, are brought up to think that our systems are separate and we are kings of nature, which is of course a very strange idea if you think about it. But when I came into politics and suddenly was taken out of my cozy job as a bookseller and maybe a grassroots person, and suddenly being put into City Hall in Reykjavik, where I started out, and in charge of the school system of the capital city. It was well, my biggest amazement was to find that the same dynamics rule in every system. So when you're in a political city council, or you are sitting with a group of 100 principals from schools, or if you are sitting in your rehearsal space with your punk band, it's still the same dynamics of, some say power and hierarchy and so on, but I say first and foremost communication. So I found, to my considerable amazement, that tricks I had developed to make things go smoothly in my punk band could also work within big official systems. And this has brought me back to this thinking that us as humans, we are all very similar animals, and we all have similar needs. And systems that we make, human systems and institutions, are in essence, they all work the same way. So what we have a tendency when our systems go bad, we try to make them more structured and exercise more power on them. But when they are strong and work strongly, we have a tendency to be able to be more inclusive. So when I then found myself in the position of being in charge as Minister of Health of the Icelandic health system, which is arguably the biggest system, I guess, in Iceland, or at least with the most people working in it and so on. I find that first, and of course, I'm a politician and a former punk rocker, and I'm probably the least smart person in most of the rooms. I'm not a specialist in health at all. And that's not really even my role, because I, as an elected official, am sort of a representative of the public. So I have to find this balance of listening to what the public is calling for or thinking about, and on one side, and listening to the experts on the other side who really know how the system is working, and listening to maybe some more radical voices out in the community saying, no, the system is broken, we have to throw it away and make a new system. But obviously you cannot just throw away the hospital and build a new one and start again in the same day. So we have to live with these systems as we move them along. So that's my background. I think it's, I have been involved with all of these different systems, and a lot of them were quite, shall we say, paralyzed after the economic collapse, and paralyzed with a great loss of trust both within and without. So yeah, I'll stop there, and I'd like to get into the discussion. I'm really looking forward to it, and hearing from your experiences. Thanks.
Thank you. I can just say I feel already happy that I invited you to this panel. I got to know all of you a little bit differently than before, and now I really feel like sitting in a circle with you here in our veranda in the Institute. The space is ours. I'm so curious what you want to pick up on.
Can I try? I mean, this is a fantastic group, and I have a big regret that we are not physically in one room, because there is so much to be learned here. Can I just throw in a couple of things, and maybe they're unordered, but the first thing is going back to Nicole and Lanying. So the question of how do you do with overwhelming complexity? And I put down two words. One is intuition, but sometimes we just know. And that's a fantastic thing. There is an inner compass. We know where to go, even if the things are incredibly complex and it's not our area of expertise. And the other thing is the functioning in a community. And actually in small communities, complexity becomes understandable. But I think we are facing global problems, and we don't yet have this sense of a global community that makes it really difficult. And then my last thing is to Otta, and I'm fascinated, because I'm fascinated by punk. And if there's anything like a punk attitude, then is basically, well, I haven't learned that. I don't know how to play the instrument. Screw it, I do it anyway. And out comes classic pieces of music. And this is what I have seen over the last years, with children taking to the street and basically saying, well, you know, you're not fixing the climate and biodiversity disaster. and come in with a power and innocence that actually cuts through things that in 20 years of negotiations are not happening. So that's my first takeaway from this round. It's really fascinating. Thanks, Tom, for inviting me to that.
Maybe if I pick up. I liked what you said, Martin, about sometimes we know in terms of this overwhelming complexity. And again, this makes me, tied to what you said, Lanying, about, you talked about patterns, right? And you talked about natural systems and about, these communities that you mentioned. They don't necessarily talk about it, but there's a certain common knowledge among them that's based upon these natural systems. And I think it, just like maybe we don't have a global community yet where this complexity can become more understandable, similarly, our rhythms are disconnected from rhythms that maybe can harmonize more with some of these natural systems, where this knowledge can be more accessible, because I think it's there, but we have to be in a certain inner rhythm that makes this accessible. And I feel that there's such a disconnect between the rhythm of the world, and I think you mentioned it before, Thomas, about, like we just get caught up in action, and the rhythm is so fast and it's so demanding, and so there's kind of this split between an inner rhythm where we connect with something else, and then maybe we have that clarity and that knowing, and just being caught in this treadmill of, oh my God, there's such an urgency, we have to do millions of things.
Maybe if I pick up on that, that is the one thing that I don't miss from being active as a minister or very active in politics, is that the political system or the political world or bubble is sort of made to keep you busy at all times. As a minister, you don't really dare, or it feels bad if you have to go on a short plane ride, or if you go into the cinema and you come out and you wonder what's happened in between, what terrible crisis has started that I haven't heard about, and sometimes, in a space of 2 hours, you are suddenly embroiled in a big media or social media crisis that you had no idea could happen when you woke up in the morning. So I found that was probably the hardest thing in that position, because as Minister of Health, you could say that, yes, I was on as ahead of this system, which was the Icelandic health system. But at the same time, I was a part of so many other systems, because I was also head and working in my political party that also had its own dynamics and its own ideas about things. I was also working in a coalition government with other parties, and in all of these spaces I had different roles, and they were all going on at the same time. So that was an interesting juggle for me, maybe because I hadn't had the long experience getting ready for it that maybe the more professional politicians have. But this compromising between the different systems that I was part of, and I think that for us personally is something that maybe we are not always aware of, but we do have different roles in different systems. So I might be sitting in uh, a media meeting about politics, but I would really be thinking about, what if I say this? Will my mom get mad? You know, because that's another system that I'm a part of, my family.
Mm.
So that's just on a personal level. I think it's so important that we have that we are conscious of our roles, but also how we are functioning, and we're not just uh, uh, going along in a robotly fashion, you know.
I feel you wanted to say something, Lanying, and you were still muted. The classic in Zoom calls. Yeah, we can't hear you yet, Lanying. Yep.
Okay. It's controlled. It's being controlled. It's natural, not naturally react. Um, the question raised about the complexity, and also talking about we're trying to see a global community. It reminds me of one thing in China is that um, how you see it being there are something or there's none something, none and there are. So the global community is not there because probably wants to have something concrete or visible, but in fact there's something already there if we start with all the individuals. So there's a saying in China is that if you do cultivate yourself, and you could be already approaching the Tao, then if everybody do that the same, and it will emerge as one vision, one thing that all of us wish to have. So to understand that, so the complexity and also global community is we trying to understand what's the important bottom thing, what's the, let's say for example like a tree, what's the roots, what's the fruits. So the roots is invisible, but it could nurtured if individuals doing that is not visible. But if we are cultivate us ourselves, then it will nurture to bear the fruits later. And also to understand the complexity of the system, they is also important, is trying to understand how to say what's the origins, what's the cause, and what's the first, what's the time from the sequencing, from the how to say maybe the pattern, the word pattern would be the right word, and just like the water, you just go with it, but gradually you will shape it into the way you would like.
Mm-hmm.
So I think all seeing this, we believe is that we have start with ourselves, then with your family. So when you do yourself, then you influence your family. This is the smallest cell in the community, in the world, larger system. So we believe if everybody do the same cultivation, and the global community already there, it's not the structural, it's just by the spiritual, and your kind of nature, human nature. So it's just our human nature often influenced or affected by outside the environment. So the cultivation is that you are not influenced by the outer system. We are not only affected or our thinking, our mentality, trying to not to be affected by this system, but trying to go to the inner side, then it will go to the way, finally will form that kind of a system that we will see. But this the system is already in ourselves. Is as Thomas, what you said a while ago, I heard the last part you shared. So you yourself is a system. But if we have the same vision, yeah, so we nurture ourselves, so the system already there. So for even Confucius said, if you do practice yourself, cultivate yourself and the home, you already can influence the world. So but this is very abstract, I think, but it still relate to the spiritual cultivation. Yeah. So I think it's kind of a non there's a non thing and a visible thing, but how you see the non thing, uh, that's the space that you can nurturing the things that you want to see. Sorry, I don't know whether I make clear, but
Absolutely.
I do feel, yeah.
I feel like weaving in a few reflections as I've been following you, because I feel there are some connected threads. Martin, you started us off with the intuition, yeah, and Nicole, you spoke about like this experience of thinking about the whole, and what I feel what we didn't touch yet is how much that is also not only an understanding process but a sensing process. And when you described, Ottar, in which challenges you are put in this executive role, I'm wondering to what extent we are actually depriving our ability to sense. And that certainly for me has to do with that sense of disconnect that was mentioned. I don't know whether you, Martin, or you, Nicole, brought that in. But intuition is also something shaped by our continuous experience. So, and that is what I heard, at least from the Chinese that I was related with, how much that is an important heritage of culture and education to sense relationships, beginning with the family. And not so much emphasize like who am I, what is my goal, what should I do, yeah, but much more this sensitivity of the whole. And that's where I see a complementarity, with the role clarity as part of the whole. And Martin, you described how you see this struggle of finding compromise, which to me is an expression of emphasizing difference.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed.
Mm-hmm.
If I can come in, I found it super interesting, Otta, what you said about not being a politician, but sort of the word I put down is a moderator. That you have your doctors, your medical machinery that maybe nobody other than the experts understand, but you understand the relationship and you come in as a moderator. Um, I I agree. What I find frustrating at times is if you acknowledge and if you work on the assumption that people want to have the freedom to decide, then quite often you're also dealing with people who don't want the responsibility, who want to be told, who want to be led, who find it easier sent in a direction and to complain about being sent in a direction than taking the steering wheel themselves. And so, how do you deal with that? I think, in our assumptions of leadership and problem solving, we are often assuming that people want this empowerment to take their own decisions. But one of the things which is a current topic in every panel I hear in is a lack of leadership. So, what is a lack of leadership? A lack of leadership is the hope that somebody else is going to fix something for you when you actually should be doing it yourself. I don't know whether that makes sense, but this is this is relating back to the individual. First, the acknowledgement of your own responsibility, of your own possibilities, and then, you know, coming collectively together in an understanding of I'm a part of the solution. I can contribute something, and I'm not just sitting and complaining and waiting that somebody else is going to fix something for me.
Maybe if I just come into this, I think this is a very important point, because one of the problems we have, at least in the political systems, is that, we have a tendency in many of our systems to have watered down leadership, because we are trying to be more inclusive and trying to make our systems more democratic, which in itself is a very positive change that we are trying to make. At the same time, we are developing a lot of our systems in such a way to make sure that, how should you say, bad leaders or stupid leaders do not destroy the systems with bad decisions. So in some ways, you could say that we have been taking the power out of the hands of leaders who have been put in the position to do something. And this is very negative when you have good leaders, and very positive when you have bad leaders. So I think this is something that we can actually work with. And in my experience, coming into institutions and systems that were dysfunctional, it's very often because there has been a collapse or a loss of trust within the system. Very often because of bad leadership or bad outside influence. And the only way to develop trust, and the leader needs trust. It's not enough just to get handed the crown and now you can decide everything. So I find that the very best way of getting trust and inspiring people is by listening. And I actually learned this when I was a young boy, probably 12, 13 years old. I was helping out on a farm here in Iceland, and one of my jobs was to take a group of cows out to the meadow in the morning and fetching them in the evening. And to start with, this was very hard because it was 15, 20 cows. They were 10, 20 times bigger and heavier than myself. And they didn't really take to my leadership. They didn't listen to me when I was trying to get them to walk along. And I had this idea that I was this human part of this farm, and they were supposed to listen to what I said. So it was a friction that I had, that I couldn't win, until I noticed that these cows had personalities. And there were actually some cows that were leaders in their cow group, and they obviously had some ideas. So when I managed to make friends with those cows, I figured that they didn't really care what they were doing. So I could trick them into following me, and we all got back together. So that was a big moment for me personally, to find that I could make a connection and work with even a big cow that I couldn't speak to. You know, communication is the key, and we have an ability of communicating, you know, in so many ways. And for me, that's the challenge. So that's the fun of that's the solution to most things, actually. Well, thanks.
Nicole, you are shining. I'm so curious what's on your mind.
Because I love your story, Ottar, and I don't know what to say anymore, because it just makes me makes me laugh. But I mean, it's very profound, and at the same time, it's also funny because I was imagining all the citizens as cows, right? As you were a minister, and going about it in the same way. So that's why I'm laughing. But to pick up again on the this question of responsibility and accountability, and kind of this barrier. You were saying, like, how much power should politicians have, and what's kind of this line, and of course it's always moving, and it moves in different countries and different contexts. But what it got me thinking is the personal responsibility and personal accountability. And very often, I mean, when it comes to the environment, so how, like, this, it's very easy to put the blame onto someone else, right? And to ask someone else to fix the problem, whether it's the politicians or the companies, the private sector, or whoever, the environmental community that's not getting its act together. I mean, there's so many reasons one could invoke, and I think ultimately what I'd like to see is a step further in the direction of self responsibility, and each person, wherever they are, whoever they are, really taking responsibility for the planet as a whole. And this goes away from this fragmentation that you also mentioned, Martin. But can we have this integrative view, and can each of us be responsible for all of it? And I think that this is very can be very scary as well, because if we take this really seriously, it's huge and it's very serious. But I think that's what's needed, and that we feel ourselves as part of the planet, as part of this system and all these systems, and that we are empowered. But we're only empowered if we take that self-responsibility, and if we are accountable for everything. And it's so I guess when I'm seeing, I think there's different roles different people play, whether it's on the activism side, on the bridge building side. But I'm often wishing that there was more of this, also maybe introspection, and opening towards questioning oneself. And of course it has to do with daily acts, and our actions, and what we consume and what we buy, and it starts there. But it's actually much bigger than that, and it's much more in terms of how do we relate to this earth earth being that we are a part of.
Martin, Thomas,
Mhm. Always.
is it? I saw yes, some words come up. I love the stories because it's really kind of learning from the nature, right? From learning from the life, whatever. So it's very interesting that we are also the Chinese words, like a group, social group. Actually, one side is written as a sheep, right? A social group. The one side is the word means sheep. The other side is mouth, yeah, and with kind of leader, is sort of leader will speak from their mouths, but also in the sheep group, you can see they often have a kind of a leader, right? But I think looking at our own is that it's often is the leader often within the group you don't is not visible, right? In the sheep group, it's not visible, but they often have one really kind of lead the group, but they are equal. You don't see that it's not super. Even we talk about global system, if we're looking at the nature, human society, nature as an equal, so you don't feel you're small, you don't feel you're big. It's equal. So from the sheep, the ancestors of Chinese probably create the words, looking at that, how the group form, how the leaders lead. So I feel that stories is very interesting. So for us, the talking about the everybody's responsibility. So you need to really start, as I said, really start with yourself. But there's also kind of speak the same language, because we see there's a kind of modern knowledge, but there's a traditional knowledge, which is two parallel system. Sometimes when you talk, maybe you already speak in your own framework, your knowledge system, which cannot get understood. So we really being with them, being part of it, and make yourself within like them, speak their language, so then you understand. So what I want to say is that don't make it confrontational. Always Chinese is talking about balance. The balance is not balance is not very accurate word. It's really kind of, you go with the flow, find the best ways of the solution. So everything should be reflected. When you see the others, you see yourself also. So should be really kind of the others reflecting you. When you see the others, also reflect your own self. That's the very important way to look at that, what we want to achieve. Yeah.
As you speak, Lanying, I'm just thinking, we are talking in English with each other. For none of us, that's our mother tongue. And it's, I mean, it's so challenging when like you described, Lanying, I share that sense to recognize the nature of myself in the being that I relate with. And at the same time, it requires a certain space and a certain quality of relating. And I'm suffering when I witness how that space gets squeezed down to a functional interaction where there is no space to recognize this is a human being and we share a deep experience of being human, below all the apparent differences, you know. And I can imagine that's the daily reality, particularly of you, Martin, or maybe also of you, Nicole, like to try to help people work together, but what do you do if there is no space for them to see this commonality? That's that you're talking about, Lanying.
Yeah, functionality or relating, right? That's the difference.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You're on mute, Martin. I had to mute because I have my kids in the background. But this is precisely what I want to say. This is the interesting thing about this last year with these Zoom conferences all the time. On the one side, your agenda is getting even tighter, but sometimes the little accident, your kid popping in, a cat jumping on the keyboard, really establishes this connection because wow, I'm talking to a human being. You know, I can take my camera, show it around, and you will see what a mess this room is because I have adjusted the camera so you don't see it, right? And that is the relationship because suddenly we are doing intergovernmental conferences and people are sitting in their living room and, you know, unforeseen things are happening. I had a meeting with the head of the World Food Program, super high level, and just won the Nobel Peace Prize. And my teenager locked himself out and he rang the door like crazy while I was speaking. And at one point, I just had to stand up and say, well, my apologies, my son forgot his door key, you know, and these things, they really build a relationship. And suddenly you're not just the speaking head but you're a human being. You have a family. You have a space in which you operate.
Mm-hmm.
I think I love your story, Martin, because it's also reminds everybody that how similar we all are, even if we speak different countries and live different languages, live all over the world, have different levels of importance, but at the same time we are all humans, and there are so many things that are connected. We all know this idea of forgetting your keys, or having awkward moments, finding humor in things. And these things are so useful also to help make connections, because connections between people, once you have this understanding, you have these connections, it's so easy to discuss things even if you can't even talk together. And I think that's one of the reasons usually we try to get together in a physical space, because we're all attuned to sort of look at, you know, how we are moving our hands or whatever. But I find one thing in these last years, doing endless Zoom meetings and sometimes with very many people, it's very liberalizing also for me to see that everybody's stamp is the same size and everybody's head is the same size, and no one with a big ego is taking over the meeting and suddenly having half of the screen. And that is one of the things that we have to think about also in structures. That is when ego comes in, and or ego is expected. And how do we work with people who have different ideas about their importance than maybe other people have? It can't be that they think they should really be in charge of everything, but also sometimes it's the other way around, and you have very smart people that you know are smart people, but they have this feeling that they really shouldn't be, they should be to the side. They shouldn't either they shouldn't be bothered, or they're not important enough. And I've been thinking about that a lot, how we can sidestep these problems. It'd be interesting to hear what you say.
All of us, or well, it's an interesting thing, because on the one side, and we all grew up like that, university, and I'm a diplomat by training, diplomat school. It's all about managing your ego, being integrative, listening, bringing people in. And that is what I meant earlier, that I found more than once in my life that if you do that, sometimes people are puzzled because you don't fit what they would expect from a boss. They would, and sometimes I find that absurd, sometimes they would prefer a person who is just with an iron fist telling people, you do this and you shut up and you do as instructed, than having someone who says, so what do you think? How do we get out of this situation? How do we do that? And I'm struggling with that because it's against what I have learned. It's against what I'm trying to apply. But quite often you see then these people even coming to very senior leadership positions who are obviously wrong, who are obviously egomanic, but they are getting the support, they are being elected, and you know all the cases I'm referring to. So how can that happen? You know, the strong man, the typical strong man, can only happen with a lot of weak people voting for that person. And that is where I'm struggling and where I'm wondering, what is that? Is that a denial of your responsibility? Is that a wish that somebody else is fixing for that? I mean, we can complain about voting results for populist parties, but we cannot close our eyes that it's a reality and somehow they manage to cater to wishes of people. So why is it that people are wishing to be subordinated, to be objects, not to be subjects themselves. And that is something I'm struggling very much with. And that's still the reality, that we are fascinated by big egos. This handful of billionaires, or in the meantime, it's more, that are constantly dominating the headlines. Why are we so fascinated by this seemingly strong leading personality?
Nicole, I see you unmute yourself.
I have a number of things to say. I think, I mean, I would say maybe just separating the political process of voting and then within an organizational structure, even if there's some similar, patterns, as you said. But I feel that within an organizational structure, I mean, there are shifts happening, but indeed it requires more responsibility, more accountability for the results, but it also requires being empowered to make those decisions. So it's a whole process, and I feel that a lot of us have been educated and conditioned according to an old type of system, which is hierarchical, where you don't speak up, you don't like question, you just follow that hierarchy. And so making that transition requires a pretty deep internal transformation as well. And so I think, however, on the other hand, when I see kind of new generations and kind of new organizational models and based on holacracy and sociocracy, and it seems like some of the younger generation, of course it's not generally applicable, but take to these kinds of structures much more easily because they haven't been conditioned to the same extent as we have.
Yeah.
So I think there's part of that happening in terms of what you describe. And then the other, which is something I've worked on for a long time, is this masculine feminine, right? And kind of the gender, but not in terms necessarily of men women, even if that's how it's being understood in leadership, but more in terms of what are the qualities that we recognize as being leadership qualities. What does a leader need to have? And I think, again, there's a very deep conditioning process that has happened, that has been kind of defaulting to very hierarchical, masculine, the hero, the top down. And this is shifting as well, and much more of the feminine energy is coming in, which is more about collaboration and coalitions. And I mean, to go back to systems, I think it's also a very different way of shifting systems. So I do think there's a transition that's happening, and that there is a change in terms also of what we value and how we can celebrate and give value to some of these other traits, but we're not there yet. And there's kind of a fracture in terms of, whether it's within countries, whether it's within organizations, or even individuals. But there's these different forces that are pushing against each other.
Lanying, I can imagine there's a lot on your mind in this direction.
But I do agree that there's a lot of how to say it, a lot of differences. I think traditionally the common people in China, uh, the people would like to have a good leader. So the good leader will do everything, do most of the things for them. So in the history, so there's a lot of kind of plays or stories talking about the leaders, how good the leaders help the poor people to fight for the bad things, trying to help the vulnerable group, or etc. As the new era, I think the younger generation start to be more emphasized, more searching for their individual um, individual. They want to have their own choice. They want to have their own space. So But still, I think in the Chinese community is still people looking at the collective action to respond to the most difficulties. So there are some even talking about the masculine and the feminine, and in the farming communities, it's really have a, they feel it's a rational distribution of labor between men and women. So it's really kind of the lowest, most effective way of doing farming by being husband and wife. They do different things. So women will do all the house chores, and the man will do the farming. But man plow the field, the women will put the seeds. So they work together in the field, but women will also do more house chores in the home. And interesting, one story, what we did, we're trying to emphasize gender role. So we did the gender labor distribution 24 hours a day. That's almost, I think, 20 years ago. And it's resorted, a couple got divorced because the wife is kind of college educated, and she married this man in the village. So other women are adopt to that situation. So when we did the training on the gender role, and she realized that, then after that training, she decided to have the divorce. So this is really gave us very strong impact. What we think about, are we doing right thing? Women need to empowerment, but we break up the family after that training. So in the rural community, definitely there's a different view, and how we really look at that equal role in that. So I think this is very this story deeply I mean, I often remember this. So every time when we talk about gender, so it has to put into the context about their way of maintaining that relations before we are just applying the gender analysis tools in the field.
I am in a terrible situation now because I have to do what I usually never like to do. I have to keep the time. And I feel we are scratching a few very profound topics that I would love to deepen with you. And there is no coffee break we have afterwards where the five of us can just sit together and deepen it. But what I'm hearing, what is really sitting with me at the moment is two things. The one about vulnerability that you mentioned, Ottar. Basically, as soon as humanity is invited, the example you shared, Martin, about your son ringing the door and so forth, I feel it has so much to do with allowing the vulnerability of being human to be part of relationship. And for me, that the fact that this vulnerability has so little space, at least here in the Western cultural context that I'm familiar with, has a lot to do with what you said, Nicole, about this. We praise the hero. You know, we grow up with these stories about heroes and being the best one, the strongest one to compete. And that for me is a striking difference to what I'm beginning to learn about how Chinese have understood leadership over centuries and thousands of years, where you emphasize, as you said, Lanying, the collective, like the sheep. There is an invisible leader among the sheep. And honestly, I'm just so stunned how when we are in international communication, these unconscious understandings of relationships are part of the communication and we may not be aware of it. I would love to deepen that with you and how to relate kind of with this humanity, with these different conditionings. I have the sense this is not the last conversation of the five of us, hopefully. But as we are approaching 5 o'clock, I would invite us to have a moment of silence and let it sink. We've been exchanging for 1 hour, 20 minutes. So long, it flies by, I feel remarkable. Let's sit for a moment and just let's sink what we have heard and how we have engaged. And after the silence, I would invite each of us to just share one takeaway, how we leave this conversation. Let's hold just 20 seconds of focus. So much is coming up for me. So, whoever feels like speaking first, let's hear from everyone. A brief closing, how you leave our conversation for now, as much as it's hopefully not the end of our conversation.
Well, maybe if I start out, it's been a wonderful conversation, and I agree with you, Tom. I would really like to sit with the rest of you through a night at some point to discuss things. But what I'm taking away, I'm very enlightened, and there have been so many good points that I feel that I'm starting to think about and will be thinking about. But what's on my mind now is this idea of how we can, as an individual or as persons and humans, how we can be effective in systems, how we can melt our egos or manage our egos without them, without melting the whole away and being ineffective. So how to find this balance, and how do we find the tools to manage ourselves to be effective in such situations? And I love leaving this with a very, very open question, maybe even more open than we started out with. Thanks everybody for a wonderful conversation.
Thomas, I can echo that. The strongest feeling is I would really love to have this coffee break and continue with all of you. Not possible. My strongest feeling, even if we only touched about it peripherically, is this is a moment where many things change fundamentally for every person on this planet. And I think individual uncertainties, individual open questions also reflect a societal change in a way that we don't understand yet. And I very much appreciated what Nicole said about gender, but gender as not in men and women, but in a way to address that. Because I have dealt also with very successful women, and all too often they have become almost cartoon versions of the men they suffered under before, which also cannot be right. So this idea of things are moving, and as things are moving, it is an understandable and maybe a shared experience sometimes just to be lost and not understanding what exactly is happening. So that's what I'm taking from here. And it shouldn't sound negative because I'm really leaving this very energized.
Okay. I just got the shared view, so I just follow up. I do believe, often in China we see that we are encountering a big change that we have never experienced in the past 100 years. So this is the biggest time for change. And with all the information and technology, so it's really down to the earth for each individuals to embrace the change, but also change ourselves to respond to the change, to bring the positive to achieve the good things for this changing world. And I think the diversity, because we are from different social environments, so there's a different culture and perspective. And I really love that if there's some further chance then to get to know, to have more comfortable conversation without language barriers, that would be nice. But hopefully, yeah, we can have more conversation. Yeah.
So thank you all. I leave with images of cows and sheep, lots of images, but also images of systems and kind of just all these systems and this movement, right, and this transformation, and within that kind of the line of how can we connect and learn more again from natural systems and reconnect to that, circular process, and maybe more ancient ways of knowing, which relates for me to this question of rhythms, right? What rhythms are within each of these systems, and what rhythms do we want to align with, and to make this space to sense, as you said at the beginning, Thomas. So thank you all.
So how do I leave? Happy that I connected you. I'm not surprised that there was this resonance among you, and I take it as a note for me. I will do my best to reconnect us in this constellation and try to create an occasion for you to continue this conversation. And the image that came up for me in the silence was reconnecting to Ottar's story about the responsibility and the self. And I felt it has so much to do with trusting that I do my thing in my context. I do my development. I try to focus on my responsibility, and I trust that somebody else is doing theirs. And relating with people like you nourishes this trust in me, to just know that human beings like you are around in different systems doing your contribution gives me a feeling of hope that there are many people around in this journey that we are actually connected in, as much as I might sometimes feel alone, which I never really are.